Greetings. Welcome to the inaugural edition of The Point with CDS Community Development Strategies. I'm Steve Spillett, President of CDS. With me I have Ty Jacobson, Senior Market and GIS Analyst, and Mike Pratt, Senior Market Analyst. We are basically here to give our perspectives on some of the various land use markets and the way they interact with our economy and life in general, related to the kinds of work that we do, the market analysis work that is our main line of business. And today, since this is our inaugural edition, the first couple episodes we're doing here are going to be an overview of different land use markets. And today we're actually focusing on housing, which we do probably more study of housing than any other particular land use. And wanted to just talk about what's going on with housing and the kinds of issues and topics we're seeing in our work. And to kick off, I'm just going to kind of set the context a little bit, and that is that we've seen the craziness of the pandemic years, kind of from 2020 to 2022, has really eased off. It had profound effects on all kinds of housing, actually, and certainly something that we as CDS had never really dealt with before. No one had ever dealt with before in the modern sense, in terms of the way we conduct real estate in this country. So now, since 2023, things like job growth have moderated. The kinds of sharp supply shortages and fluctuations in demand and different preferences that emerged. And so the since 2022, from 2023 to the present time, we've seen a moderation in the job fluctuations. We had a job crash that only lasted a few months at most, and then an exceptional recovery all over the nation, and the Houston region included. We had supply shortages that constricted the ability to build new housing and significantly affected the price of housing, to get it to build housing. You had changing preferences, people moving out of dense urban areas to ex-urban areas, but then that went away and urban areas came back. Second home purchases and all these things, relocation out of high-cost areas into more moderate-cost areas such as Texas. So all those things have kind of moderated. Our job growth in the region was certainly positive, but lower than it had been in 2021 and 2022, when we really had exceptional numbers, and you saw that around Texas. And in fact, in a couple other metro areas, you even saw sometimes job loss. Of course, Austin notably had some significant slowdowns in its tech sector, which was really the animating force in their housing market. And the forecast, at least our local, one of our local economists, Patrick Jankowski, is saying we should do fine in 2024, but it won't be exceptional. It should be a fairly moderate year by our standards. The population still continues to grow as people move into the region, as well as internal natural growth, which is births over deaths. And so both those things will continue to generate demand for housing. So talking about housing specifically, I wanted to start with for sale housing. And I do have some information from our local HAR, the Houston Association of Realtors. This is sort of a recap of 2023. We're here in early February of 2024, so at the beginning of 2024. And there's still an inventory shortage of existing homes, which, and in fact, that was a drop from 2023 in terms of total sales from 2022. According to them, single-family home sales dropped 12%. However, whereas in the past that might have caused prices to go up a lot, when you have a supply shortage, the median sales price actually softened slightly, down 2.5% to $330,000. So it pretty much plateaued, basically, for 2023. A lot of that probably had to do with the level of interest rates that were elevated compared to what they had been prior, going into the pandemic, when they were very, very historically exceptionally low. So a lot of folks found housing even more affordable than it had been. So that probably was constricting sales, as well as the people hanging on to their existing homes if they had a low rate mortgage. But what are y'all's thoughts as far as where you think housing can go in terms of the existing housing stock that we have in Houston, which is obviously in a metro area the size is huge, but also the role that new housing is likely going to play in terms of meeting the demand, which, there had been a housing shortage as much here as anywhere else, and then thinking about some of the other markets that we're working in. So I'll start with you, Ty.
Oh, okay. Well, I think certainly the impact of interest rates that really can't be overstated. Anyone who's bought a house in those relatively recent years when interest rates are low is not going to be looking to move unless they need to, simply because they'll be dealing with a mortgage that's going to probably be higher if they're moving to a house that's comparable in price and size, but just the nature of what their buying power might be. Much less people who don't own a home right now. I think it was at a presentation, it wasn't too long ago, maybe a month or two ago. They were talking about just interest rates over, for what you might have been able to get in early 2020, removing something like well into six figures, $150,000, $160,000, about what people in a sort of a median income of a home buyer could afford, and that takes a huge chunk out of what you can actually even look at in the market. And until those interest rates go down, you're probably going to continue to see some constraint on that type of activity with both with existing and new homes. Now, new homes can be built in a certain way to meet a certain price range, price point, right? And builders can offer incentives in certain ways too to get that product to move. And that seems to be what a lot of industry experts expect, that here until interest rates go down, that new construction is going to be a larger share of home sales than it had been prior.
Right. New construction's really had to fill a much greater role in satisfying overall housing demand than it had been in past years. And so, Mike, you've been doing a lot of housing studies around Houston and around Texas and Oklahoma. And so what are some of the things you're seeing in the way that new housing is trying to meet demand, including demand for entry-level homes, even as development costs have gone up?
Yeah, there's existing homes and there's new homes, and it's important to keep those two kind of separate when you're thinking about housing. So builders of new homes, they can offer rate buy down, so you can buy a brand new home from a large builder, and they'll give you a lower rate than what you're going to get on the traditional conventional or maybe FHA mortgage interest rate. So they have an advantage with that, and zoning and land use policies. Planning in general has allowed for large builders to have an advantage, right, over smaller builders. So any place where a large builder wants to invest, you're going to get a good chunk of new homes built because they're set up on a kind of a conveyor belt that can produce new housing a lot more cheaply than a small builder could. So in all these markets, that's what you see is new homes making up 30%. Or maybe even more at some points of the home sales that are taking place. And I think that's just going to continue. And we'll see what happens with zoning and other types of regulations that allow for smaller lots to be built on, because it's been proven that smaller lots equal lower priced homes. And so we'll see how those regulations change. Cities like Minneapolis and other cities in America have gotten rid of zoning. And that's, like Houston, we have no zoning. And so that allows for the creation of cheaper housing, and like I said, when you have a smaller lot minimums for new builds, that also lowers prices. So we'll see how those two trends continue to move in different parts of the country and different markets, and hopefully we'll see the price of new homes maybe at least stay flat and not go crazy. So we'll see.
It's incredible when we're doing some of these housing studies and we look back not even a decade and examine the share of existing home sales that were below certain price points, say below $250,000, and how much that used to, in so many parts of Texas and Oklahoma, that used to be the dominant part of the market, and now it's just a small minority of sales. And so the affordability impacts have been huge, and as you noted, builders have been trying to compensate for that by doing smaller lots to reduce the land cost and spread the infrastructure costs that they have to do over more homes. And that is one way that they're still trying to meet the demand for entry level and lower priced homes. Sometimes there's some pushback. We've been talking about, Mike was alluding to some of the changes we've seen in some of the policies where some communities have been fairly taking the initiative to try to reduce the barriers to doing smaller lots and infill housing and other things that are ways to try to add more supply, and especially supply that can be added relatively more inexpensively. There are some places that have pushed back. We know of. We've seen some pushback in some places, some rural areas outside of Houston, been trying to, even though counties have limited regulatory power, trying to have higher minimum lot sizes, and some cities also have been reluctant to reduce their minimum lot sizes. So we always try to highlight the housing supply benefits of doing that. A couple other things that we've seen include an increase in multi-generational homes. As people are increasingly, it can help with affordability, perhaps if you have multiple generations earning income that are in the same home. Also, those homes sometimes are physically set up to do rental units, to be rented out to people who are not really part of the household but will generate income. It's also a relatively inexpensive way to generate rental units. And I think also one other thing that we've seen is the impact, and this has obviously been a big question over the last couple of years, the impact of the hybrid work environments where there's a mix of people working at least part-time from home. And we saw some real changes in terms of home design and what people want out of a home when that really took off, having appropriate workspaces, having a kind of community set up where they can, if they're there all day, having access to services and retail and other things that allow them to live their daily life at home more often. And so there's some profound impacts with that as well. And we're going to be watching that going forward now that the world seems to be adjusting more and more to the reality of hybrid workplaces for office workers in particular. Any other comments on for sale housing that you think are worth mentioning, looking ahead as we go through 2024?
Well, we talked about lot sizes, and a shameless plug for the CDS Subdivision and Lot Price Survey, but
yes,
we've been doing this since 1977, 78. But just looking in the past decade, there was a time it was less than 10%, maybe less than 5%, it really wasn't that long ago, less than 5% of the lots we were tracking were below 50 feet.
Right.
And now we're talking 40%, or in that
40 and 45 foot wide lot sizes. So yeah, huge change, and that's builder driven.
Well, and a quarter of lots used to be, 70 feet, and that's a minuscule part of the market now.
Yes, so that's a very visible way that this trend towards smaller lots and sometimes smaller homes too.
What are some Houston developments that are doing smaller lots that are popular right now? Because I know Austin Point is kind of like been in the news a lot lately, and I think they're
going to have a big range of lot sizes, including small lots.
Right. And I was trying to think if there are any other just in the metro area like that.
I think you're seeing in most major developments, 40 and 45 foot lots are a pretty standard component anymore.
Even smaller than that. There was another one down, it's not quite as far as Austin Point, down in Fort Bend County, near Aliana. I believe it's Indigo. It's not,
yes,
not really fully on the ground and selling the models on the ground yet,
right.
But I believe the plan calls for 35 foot lots there, when some
right.
of those single family homes are as small as 800 square foot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and in fact, Mike and I worked on studies in the Austin area where we saw that 35 foot lots were being included in developments there because their land costs are even more expensive, and the affordability issue was even greater there. So it's going to be really interesting to see how much more prevalent those get, and how builders innovate with housing types and lot layouts. Well, I want to move on to